Welcome back to Stu Studio, Conservative Takes on Music. The biggest piece of music news this week is that Boyz II Men played the Home Run Derby. So this week we will be talking about albums that turned 25 in the year 2026. But shout out Jordan Walker, go Cards. The first album we'll talk about is Tenacious D by Tenacious D. I did not hear this album until I got to high school, but we have all heard Wonder Boy and Fuck Her Gently. And of course, not the best song in the world, Tribute. So this album did not have a huge debut, but it grew on a huge audience. And obviously now we all know Tenacious D, they're a household name. And it dropped right when Jack Black was at his biggest rise in his career. What may have helped their career is Dave Grohl drumming on the album. Many people might not have known, but a huge get and a great start to a great run for a great band who probably won't be returning to the studio or the stage after Kyle Glass said that he wished Trump was killed in his assassination attempt. Next is Michelle Branch's Spirit Room. This I included just because I love the song Everywhere by Michelle. And I know that that doesn't make me special. That's just about the only song anyone can name. But man, does it hit hard. Then is Andrew WK's I Get Wet. This is another album I included just for one song. It was Andrew WK's debut, and it included his biggest song, Party Hard. I still play this song loud throughout my house to annoy my wife and get my kids hyped up, and sometimes just because it's stuck in my head. Somehow, Andrew became a mainstay on Warped Tour, even though, again, I can't name a single other song by him. He became a huge guest star for shows like Aqua Teen Hunger Force. And for a couple years, he really became the face of the party scene for the alternative scene. Next is Origin of Symmetry by Muse. This is Muse's second album after their debut Showbiz in 1999. This album isn't exactly packed with hits. The only one I could really name is Plug In Baby, but it did help launch Muse's career to the point that they were selling out Wembley for multiple nights in a row. And now Muse is practically considered mainstream, even though they haven't changed a thing about themselves. They've continued to be weird, loud, incredible musicians, putting on some of the most spectacular shows I've ever seen from a three-piece. Next, I have Iowa by Slipknot. This was Slipknot's second album after their debut called Slipknot in 1999, but I would consider this the first great Slipknot album. This album had People Equal Shit and My Plague, and I think even the most diehard Slipknot fans, not me, would include those two songs in the top 10 Slipknot songs ever. Then there is Misunderstood by Pink. I don't have very much to say about this album. The only song I recognize is Get the Party Started. But it's just crazy to think that Pink was already on her second album in 2001, and she is still selling out stadiums in the best shape of her life, doing acrobatics while singing. And this album played a huge part in that. Then there is The Argument by Fugazi. If you say Fugazi, you're wrong. I don't know that for a fact. I just think you're wrong. Fugazi has never been one of my hardest hitting bands, never been one of my favorites. But it just shows their staying power in the post-hardcore scene after debuting in 1989. I think the only song I know off of this album, The Argument, is Waiting Room, but I do pay them the respect that they've earned. Next is Alicia Keys' debut album, Songs in A Minor. I looked through the track list and the singles list from this album. I do not recognize a single one. I just know for a fact that not all of those songs are in A minor. So she started her career on a total blatant lie. But she's still around, still wildly successful. So good for her for a 25-year career so far. And we have Radiohead's Amnesiac. I've tried to get into Radiohead and it has never happened. I can name two Radiohead songs, and one of them is I Might Be Wrong, which is the only song I know off of this album. Someone tried to convince me that every Radiohead is like 5 years ahead of its time and tried to argue that they are setting the music industry's direction entirely. But I think they're just weird for weird's sake, and people like that. So good for you and good on them. Next is Yankee Hotel Foxtrot by Wilco. Wilco is a band that I actually have not given a fair chance, but I included on this list because this album was released in 2001, and they have some very sus song titles and lyrics. Songs like War on War and Ashes of American Flags, and lyrics like Tall buildings shake, voices escape, singing sad, sad songs. These songs were written and recorded well before 9/11. Although that might actually play more into the conspiracy theories. Then there's White Blood Cells by the White Stripes. This album has singles like I Fell in Love with the Girl and I Can Tell That We Are Gonna Be Friends. It's the band's third album, but it played a huge part in their rise to fame and stardom. Although somehow by their third album, Meg had not gotten better at drums. I did include Lateralis by Tool. I know the song Schism, and that is the only Tool song that I know. I know they have a huge cult following. Nothing against them, nothing against their fans, never been my thing. I'm a little bit more of a Primus guy. Then we have Survivor by Destiny's Child. This was their second album, and it has songs like Survivor, Independent Women Part 1, Independent Women Part 2, and Dangerously in Love. This is the album that probably played the biggest part in launching Beyoncé's solo career before she actually started it, because she co-wrote every single song on this album. I may not be a big fan of Queen Bee, Beyoncé, but I cannot deny her staying power. Next is Toxicity by System of a Down. This is their second album after their debut System of a Down in 1998. This album included songs like Chop Suey and Toxicity, which I think are both in the top 5, if not like place 1 and 2 System of a Down songs. I think the first System of a Down song I ever heard was BYOB on VH1 or something. But not only is Chop Suey an amazing song, it's crazy that Serj Tankian did not have a bridge and Rick Rubin said, go pick a random book off the shelf and read it, and that became their bridge. And it's crazy that it is one of the most memeable songs still to this day. Then I have Gorillaz by Gorillaz. This album does include the song Clint Eastwood, but I mostly included this on the list because it's Damon Albarn's debut as a solo artist, I guess you could say, in the Gorillaz. He frames it as a cartoon band, but it's really just him and a producer. And Gorillaz are somehow still touring and still making music. I don't know why you would go to a Gorillaz show to watch an LED screen of people you pretend you think you're seeing when it's really just Damon. But his music has not slipped in quality. Last of the list for the common folk is This It by The Strokes. This was The Strokes' debut album, and we all know the song Last Night. They hit hard coming out the gate, and it made way for mainstream hipsters. Like people that say they love indie bands, but their favorite band is The Strokes. They love to pretend and get credit for it, but none of it is true. So maybe we should all hate The Strokes, even though they're pretty good. And now to the part of the list that I really care about, the pop punk albums from 2001 that turned 25 this year. First is Green Album by Weezer. This was Weezer's third album and had songs like Hash Pipe and Island in the Sun. Now, Hash Pipe, I can take it or leave it. I've tried to explain to someone that it's not that good of a song, but they pretty credibly argued that it is musical genius. But Island in the Sun is probably my favorite Weezer song. Not that there are that many. And this album helped launch Weezer into becoming a household name and a mainstay in weird alternative music. Next is Anatomy of the Tongue-in-Cheek by Relient K. The biggest songs on this album were Pressing On, Sadie Hawkins Dance, and the rest of the album didn't get that much attention, but this I had on repeat in the early 2000s, mostly because my parents were Christians and did not let me listen to bands like Blink or Sum 41, but I'm pretty sure I could still sing this front to back, and it made for a lot of fun youth group nights with everybody shouting the words to Sadie Hawkins Dance. Then I have Perhaps I Suppose by Rufio. This album has songs like Above Me, Just a Memory, and my favorite on the album, Dipshit. This band never got the credit they deserved, especially for their presence at live shows. Oddly enough, one of my favorite things about this album is that the snare sounds absolutely terrible on every single track, but it does play into the authenticity of being a garage punk band, a skater punk band. And if you haven't heard this album, go listen front to back. Then there's From Here to Infirmary by Alkaline Trio. Alkaline has never really held a place in my mind like I know that they deserve. I love Matt Skiba, but looking through this track list, it did not include any of my favorite Alkaline Trio songs. So respect to them for their third studio album. I believe they have at least 8, and that they've stayed authentic, done what they loved, and finally got Adam Willard on drums, like Destiny always meant for them to have. Next, there is Stay What You Are by Saves the Day. This is the band's third album, but it is widely considered their best. I went to the 20th anniversary show, and it was surreal to be in a room of 30 to 40-year-olds screaming every single word to a pop-punk album from the early 2000s. This has songs like At Your Funeral and the lesser known Firefly, which I think is my favorite Saves the Day song, probably tied with At Your Funeral. Just the top two on one album. Next is All Killer No Filler by Sum 41. This has their two biggest hits, I would argue, In Too Deep and Fat Lip, and also one of their most underrated, most hilarious songs, Pain for Pleasure. Online, this says that this is their debut album, but we all know that it came after Half Hour Power. But it did show that Sum 41 became gods of pop punk. They have a right to sit on the council, and for the last 25 years, Derek can do no wrong, except for maybe fumbling Avril. And of course is Take Off Your Pants and Jacket by Blink-182. This was their highly anticipated follow-up to their massive success of Enema of the State, and further progressed the genre of pop punk. I don't think anyone would argue that Blink are not the perfecters of pop punk, or that the two-album run of Enema and Take Off Your Pants is the defining shaping event in pop punk history. This is my favorite band. This will always be my favorite band. And somehow after 25 years, through ups and downs, through cancer and plane crashes, they are still going. Off and on, but currently on. And lastly, I have my favorite album of all time, Bleed American by Jimmy Eat World. This album briefly went by a different name after 9/11, but everyone knows it, including iTunes, as Bleed American. This has probably their biggest hit, In the Middle, but not a single song on this album is skippable, especially if you listen to it in order. All the way from the opening Bleed American to Praise Chorus down to Your House in the middle, even through Cautioneers, the Authority song, and My Sundown. I would consider this front to back in total the greatest album of all time. And I'm only a little bit biased and only have a little bit of recency bias because I saw them play this album front to back at Red Rocks last month, but it has never shifted in my list. I know that this list may make you feel old because you remember the first time you heard these albums, maybe even when they released in 2001, but hopefully it gives you a little something to reflect back on and compare to today's music. And someday we can see what modern music held up while we're still going back to albums from 25 years ago. But I hope you enjoyed the list. That's it for now. Thanks for watching this week's episode of Stu Studio, and remember, Jesus loves you.